I've been brought back into situations in my past where I literally see my grown-up self looking over my younger self going through these situations where he didn't understand what was happening. I've become what's called the observer of your life, and this is a natural state of being for everyone. It's just when do you get to experience that in life?
Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphne Horowitz, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit and makes a difference. Learning to thrive in chaos is Matthew Schwab's game, having spent many years as a captain in the Merchant Marines. He learned through his life experiences, and many of them were challenging, that you need to find stillness in order to find your inner strength. We create our own stories and interpretations of external events and often get stuck in the same loops, creating the same reality over and over again by repeating our patterns and our way of thinking. The way to change it is to be still, to connect with yourself, and begin to change your story. Matthew shares some of his stories with us in this conversation today that helped him to find his inner strength and recreate his reality. He walked away from a 20-year career and reinvented himself and his life. In this episode, he shares some tips on how to find stillness through breathing, meditation, morning routines, and shifting your mindset. He shares how to work with your body to find the pause and really make a powerful choice in the moment. Enjoy, and I'd love to know what insights you have as a result of listening to our conversation today. Visit my website at daphnaHorowitz.com, where you can find great resources for leadership, and also feel free to get in touch and let me know what you think. How has listening to this conversation impacted you? So today we have a really exciting episode of Leadership Live. I've got a guest that I cannot wait to deep dive into some really interesting topics with you, Matthew. Thanks for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Daphne.
So a quick introduction. I'm just going to pick some of the highlights because I know we've already spent a lot of time talking about the stories and experiences you've had. But in terms of your bio, let's just say that you have been a United States Merchant Marines officer for 20 years, traveling the world's oceans and experiencing nearly 40 countries in the process. As a captain, so I should call you Captain Matthew, right?
if you'd like, yeah.
Welcome, Captain.
Thank you.
And that you have experienced some extreme situations of isolation, change, near death, a whole lot of challenging stuff that I know has been part of your story of who you are and the transformation that has occurred in your life. And I'm really looking forward to digging into some of those stories and topics, and there's a lot that we can learn from you. So maybe let's start with, tell us a little bit about that experience of navigating the oceans and that sense of isolation and challenge and change. I'll let you lead, but share something like that with us. We'd love to hear.
Okay. I started going to sea in 2002 after graduating New York Maritime Academy in New York. And I spent the first two, almost 3 years overseas. So I went from growing up on the beaches of New Jersey in the United States to never traveling really out of the country to getting on a ship in late 2002 and just heading overseas to help with the conflict effort of the operations that were going on over there at that time. So I was thrust into a completely new world, and I actually had a good bit going on in my personal life with my family, changes that were happening, So it was really from the beginning of it, it was learning to navigate this inner growth, personal development that I had, and then the kind of piecing the puzzle together in that side, and also developing as a leader in the merchant marine and leading others. I was wrestling with this uncharted waters of rapid change there. So along the whole path, there's been this deep sense of personal development, and at the same time leading others. So I became aware of that, and
Maybe tell us a story of something that happened. What is it like to spend? I mean, I don't know if there is a specific story. I can imagine spending weeks on end, not seeing your family, on a ship, being in command. I'm sure I'd love to hear a story from there.
Okay, I'll give you a couple quick ones. I had one situation. I had moved to Hawaii to date a girlfriend of mine, and I kind of knew that it was going to go somewhere. So we ended up living in Hawaii for 2 years and getting married there. But before I got married, I had to go on a deployment, which I had to leave for a minimum of 4 months. But the company that I was working with, it was working with the military. You had to do at least 4 months on a ship away from your family. But manning was an issue at that time. So it wasn't uncommon to be 2 months overdue for getting off the ship to come home. So you'd think you'd be on there for 4 months, but you'd end up being on there for 6. Wow. So my then wife, we agreed that I was going to do 5 months on the ship at that time, and I was going to come home 2 months before our wedding. I ended up being on the ship for 7 months and 3 days. I got home 2 weeks before the wedding. So that was kind of crazy. So that's the kind of change that you really have to be adaptable to and develop this quote unquote, resiliency to. But at the same time, I was really learning deeply about like who I was and what I was able to overcome. Another example of...
What did you learn? I mean, I'd love to pause there for a moment. And what did you learn? Even in that experience, you're coming home to get married. You thought you'd be gone for 5 months, landed up being 7 months of not seeing your bride. What did you learn? What did you come out of that with?
A lot of it really didn't show itself until years and years later. But really what it was I was living this double life. Like I'd be on the ship and dealing with this insurmountable, crazy amount of change. And then I'd always be looking forward to coming home. And then when I got home, it would be a countdown of, when are they going to call me back? Or, maybe I think I have 2 months off. Okay, I have 60 days. And then the next day it's like, 59 days of vacation left. So it was constantly looking towards that future and not really appreciating or being grateful for what I had. I mean, I lived in Hawaii at the time for a good amount of the time. And, I'd be surfing.
In between. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'd be surfing in Hawaii. I grew up a surfer. So I'd be surfing in Hawaii, and then I'd just be thinking in the back of my head, this is a beautiful place, but I have to go back to work in, 50 days or whatever.
Okay. So take us to... the watershed moment that we actually spoke about before we started recording, and that moment that really shifted stuff for you in your life.
So the thing that really was the pivotal moment was understanding that I need to get more still in my life in order to accomplish more. So thinking...
How did you understand that?
I started to understand that by all these intense situations that kept throwing my way, and how I was talking about, like I just said, I thrived in chaos. That's the story I always told myself. So I kept attracting more of that. So I said, okay, and I was dealing with a lot of situations in my personal life that were kind of following that same thread. So I got into meditation probably around 2006, and by getting still, everything in your life that you thought you knew starts to come out, and you see that it's just really like it's an illusion, that it's just things that you've been told, and you have these thoughts and experiences that you connect emotion to.
Great. So I'm pausing there for a moment just so that we can really sharpen that idea. When you say that things are an illusion, you are actually saying that these are the stories or interpretations that we create in our head for what we think reality is. So the thing is actually at play and it exists, but it's the interpretation that we give it that is really creating the illusion.
Right. And there's an understanding that you essentially created the situation. Like, that's how much power you have, because you have assimilated this experience with a certain thought and that you've connected emotion to from your past, that you haven't understood why you had that experience yet, that you're creating more of these experiences. So you used to ask, the pivotal moment for me was when I had some intense spiritual experiences, when I was taken out of my body to see that there is much more to life than what we just see and hear. I mean, if you look at the color spectrum and even the sound spectrum, there's a very small quadrant of what humans can see or hear or experience. On the outside of that, there's so much more. It's the same thing with life. We like to perceive with our five senses, but beyond that, there's intuition. Beyond that, there's feeling and belief, and that's so much stronger than what we experience here. So what I had to go through was an immense amount of spiritual understanding of myself and understanding exactly why I felt the way I did about the situations that I had in my life. And I've been through playing every single emotion and that was attached to every single experience that I had, in order to understand more deeply of who I am and what type of transformation I can do for myself and then help people achieve in a very, very short amount of time.
Have you always had this awareness?
How much time do you have, Daphne?
We may need to do a part 2 of this podcast, but let's see what we can get into.
Okay, so yes, I've always had this. In fact, I've been brought back into situations in my past where I literally see my grown-up self looking over my younger self going through these situations where he didn't understand what was happening. I've become what's called the observer of your life, and this is a natural state of being for everyone. It's just when do you get to experience that in life? So yes, I've always had this, but there was a divergence of people teaching, or me allowing people to teach me different ways of doing things other than what I knew. So that really eroded at my belief, my worth, and my trust I had in myself, to where I was like depending on other people, but still doing these like crazy achievements at sea. So yes,
At what point did you have this shift that if you look at your life as more of an observer, if you become more aware of the emotional baggage, if you allow yourself to be still in the moment, at what point did this transform? Because I know this is a lifelong journey and something that we work on always, but at what point, or was there a point where there was a shift for you in the way that you saw and interpreted things and became aware of what you're creating and what you'd like to create in your life?
I think that's two different questions, because I had to go through the experiences that were of the things that I didn't see. So it's like planting some bamboo, right? Like giant bamboo doesn't grow beyond above the surface until like 3 years after it puts its roots down, and then after that it grows 60 feet a year. Right. So I think that's a great way of understanding life. I love that as well, yeah. We're just not patient to understand like that the roots are taking hold.
So I'm asking, when did your bamboo shoots start peeking from the ground?
Oh, the bamboo shoots. 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when I went full time into the Inner Voyager, and I walked away from a 20-year career because I had the understanding. I was developing happiness within myself, and I was aware of that. And once that happened, I did this through a lot of trial and error and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering that got to this point.
But imagine that point was your decision to make this a full-time thing in your life.
That's when I became fully conscious, yes.
Yes, okay. But the journey started before that.
The journey started, I would say I became aware of the journey starting in 2004 when I had a traumatic event happen to me with somebody very close that I knew.
Would you like to talk about that one?
They tried to take an attempt on their life and wasn't able to go through with it. So that shone a mirror on myself to understand who I was, and that started with emotional understanding of who I was,
Okay.
and I had to start from the bottom with shame, guilt, apathy, and then understand like why I got angry about things and why I was fearful about things. So that's when it started, and then it was just trial by fire after trial by fire and trial by fire of slowly, like, quote unquote, moving the needle to gaining a greater understanding and belief and trust and love for myself.
And I particularly loved what you said earlier about when we were talking before we started recording about how there is so much more going on than what we see in front of us. So I'd love you to talk more about that.
Yes, this life is definitely more than what meets the eye. We perceive everything with our five senses, and then we apply thought to that and think that that's our understanding of what life is. But really, when we do that, we severely limit ourselves because we're so busy confusing the static of what's going on, that we can't receive the signals that we're meant to get from our higher purpose, in order to change to that. So in order to do that, how do we start on the path to this? Because we want to make some of the things actionable. It's one thing that I do, that I take these spiritual, seemingly esoteric concepts and ground them out in practicality,
Yeah.
and then
I
reduce
think
the
that's
amount
really
of
useful.
time
Yeah.
it takes to change and grow. So how do we do that? Like, how do we practice getting still and being able to receive the signals that we're meant to receive? One is meditation, and we can do that in a morning ritual by.
How would you advise someone who has never meditated before or who's just starting to think about it?
Okay.
What would be the first step?
The journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, the first step.
Exactly.
So we are propelled through life in one of two ways. One, it's our heartbeat. Two, it's our breath. If either one of those goes out, we're dead within a minute, if not seconds. So becoming aware of your heartbeat and your breath, that just consciously taking breaths in when situations get stressful, because when stress increases, that's when we get out of the moment. That's the way I started meditation. I also started reading books about it. I remember Buddhist Boot Camp was good Lord, who was the name of the author?
Yeah, we'll look it up
I'll
and
get
put
back
it in
to
the
you,
show
yeah.
notes. No problem.
So Buddhist Boot Camp was a great way to get started on meditation. And it wasn't that I became Buddhist, it was that I was always Christian, had that belief system. So it was just a curiosity of what tools can I grab from that way of being in order to heighten who I am. So becoming aware of the breath is a very good one. And then once you start to do that, like being able to facilitate a couple deep breaths, I would recommend to everybody, if you're in a stressful situation, 6 deep breaths facilitates a mindset shift and starts to replenish your cells with oxygen. So becoming aware of the breath.
Great.
Once
So
that's
when you're
done,
feeling stressed in that moment, just take
yes,
those 6 deep breaths. You started to say something
that's it.
about incorporating something into your morning routine.
Yep. So, well, the next actionable step, once you become aware of your breath, is to be able to sit and breathe. So you can be stressed and like walking and breathing. The next step, the baby step, would be to be able to sit still and breathe. And then you start to work on your thoughts. Everything starts by mastering the breath. Morning routine. My morning routine consists of 20 to 30 minutes of meditation as soon as I get up. I don't check my phone. I don't do anything. I'll maybe put some water on for tea. So that way when I'm done meditating, I'll put it on low, and by the time I'm done meditating, I roll right into my tea. But morning meditation is essential because we're just getting up out of our delta state of brain waves and sleeping, and we're transitioning from alpha to beta state. So that transition state, you want to take advantage of that, because there's messages that we receive in our sleep that can help us throughout our day. And being able to get still upon waking and just centering yourself, taking some deep breaths, being able to slow your thoughts down. that's a great intention. Intentions are huge in starting your meditation. You want to set an intention of what that meditation is going to give to you. And it could just be staying in the moment throughout the day, being more aware of my breath, being aware of how I'm feeling about things throughout the day, just small little steps. So being able to sit and breathe, and just as your thoughts race, continually come back to the breath, because that's what meditation is. It's not a journey. It's not about reaching a destination. It's about slowing down.
Exactly. And also, if I can just jump in there for a moment, I know that from the work that I've done, that it's not about being in that centered place all the time. It's about the practice of bringing yourself back to
100%.
center. So that's the value, that's the muscle that we're trying to actually train here with the breathwork meditation.
Yep. It's about seeing things differently, and it's about appreciating the transition. A great exercise that you can do is, if you can get outside, or you can look outside, or even online, like look at a tree. What are you going to see? You're going to see the leaves, and then you're going to see the sky through the leaves. Concentrate on the space between the leaves and see the sky, and then see the tree. So try and see it in reverse. And then that helps facilitate new thought patterns and new neural networks.
So you're saying our natural inclination would be to notice the leaves and the tree and the branches first, and then notice, or maybe not even notice, the sky in between the spaces. And you saying start with the sky and the in-between spaces, and then bring your attention to the leaves and the tree, which is it's reversing the order of our thought patterns. Okay.
And it's also a way to subconsciously shift your thought process to seeing the space in between, because that's where the essence is. That's where like the stillness comes from in our transitioning, of how we transition or flow from one situation in life to another. Because if you think about it, it's like if you're doing some work and you're doing an email. I mean, a lot of us are working from home right now, so let's give a practical example. You're writing an email, and you're really centered on it, you're really focused on it, and then your spouse or your partner or your child is like wanting for attention. So you're like, oh God, all I want to do is just get this email done, and then I'll give attention, instead of just saying, oh wow, my child needs attention. Okay, I can come back to this, and I can pick up exactly where I left off. I don't have to get angry. I don't have to get frustrated about it. It's about the story I'm telling myself. Yeah. Okay, let me give the love or the attention where it's needed, and then I'll come back.
It's the space in between the emails, even, It's
the space in between the emails.
Yeah. So I'm almost even thinking, as a way of noticing that, is when we're going through emails, instead of going for one email, do it, next email, do it, next, and we almost subconsciously go from one email to the next, maybe in between, to start noticing that space in between the first email and the second email. What now? I know that I recently had a conversation with a client who we were discussing, the habits that we fall into, whether it's watching a Netflix TV series or playing a computer game. And I think those are okay. I'm not judgmental about that. If you need to switch off and relax and watch a TV series on Netflix or play a computer game, and that brings you joy, 100% go for it. But what I suggested to her at the time was, set yourself a time that you are going to do it. So whether it's one show, and then instead of diving into the next show because that button comes up where you just don't have to click anything and the next episode comes up, actually close your screen, move away from your screen, look at that space between the episodes, create space, and ask yourself, what do I really want to do now? Become aware of what you want to do in this moment before almost automatically going to the next the next show in the series. So 100%. It's I'm relating it to what you're saying about noticing the space in between the things that we're just so used to continuing doing.
Yes. And then you can use that time, once you notice the space in between, you can use your breath to kind of just take that time.
I love that. To do the 6 breaths. Yeah.
Yep. You're writing your email, and your child wants attention. Your partner wants attention. Hey, just give me 2 seconds. 5-10 seconds. 3 deep breaths. You're conscious of it. Now you're flowing right. You're resetting yourself. You're recentering yourself. you're grounding yourself, and then you're moving into the next operation.
Yeah.
The
And you're
next
saying,
situation.
where do I want to put my attention next?
That's right.
If it is about going back to the email because whatever, there's something really important going on there, that's okay. But you're making a conscious choice here instead of just being dragged from one thing and then feeling a bit resentful about all of that afterwards.
That's right. And because then you end up sending yourself into this emotional pattern of, oh gosh, I wrote that email and then I didn't give the attention to my daughter, my son, or my wife, or my husband. Now I feel guilty about it. Now I got to go process this emotion.
Exactly.
Instead of just saying, allowing and letting go of a little bit of control, because that's what this whole thing is about. And I use the term surrender because I confront limitations, and I can be a pretty uncomfortable person to talk to because we're confronting boundaries because we want to grow, and that's how we do it.
Yes.
So it's about the flow and about coming back to your breath as many times as it takes to not feel resistance.
I love that. And it ties in with what you were talking about earlier, which is moving from that space of being stuck in our head with all the thinking and the rationalization to being in the present moment.
Yes.
And through being still and slowing down, we actually land up acting a lot faster.
That's right. Thinking slow to act faster. Mm-hmm. Or it's thinking slow and fast at the same time. You know where to apply it, when to apply it, and then you're able to recenter yourself.
Exactly.
I do want to touch on something. We talked a little bit about staying in the moment. And when we get out of the moment, that creates a level of resistance in our life. And you can use the body as a gauge for that, or even a thermometer to feel, because it's about feeling. It's about getting beyond our thought and getting into our feelings and beliefs. If you are worrying about the future, you're going to notice a weight or a tension from your heart up. Your shoulders might get heavy. You might get a headache. That's you worrying about the future. And that produces anxiety. So you can literally breathe and feel that tension, pull that tension back down into like the center of your being. And that brings you into the moment. Conversely, if you're worried about the past, you're going to feel heavy from your abdomen down. You might have pain in your legs, your abdomen, your glutes, your hips. Hips are a huge one. So that creates depression. So if we're able to use the body as like a timeline and ask ourselves, okay, pause, be aware that you're feeling this and allow it, then ask yourself, instead of fighting it, say, I'm going to allow this and I want to know what this is here to show me. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be shown a situation in your life is going to flash up that maybe you had a certain emotion imprinted on you and then it caused you to worry about the future or be stuck in the past. And then when you do that, when you allow that motion to come through, you breathe into it because it gets uncomfortable, and you breathe into it. And how I like to do it is I literally, if it's in my waist or my hips, I breathe it up into my heart because the heart only knows love. And the closer that gets to your heart, the more you're almost going to feel like I'm going to say you feel like you're dying, because a part of you is. But in death, there is rebirth. And once you can breathe into that enough, you will feel the release of that emotion. You might cry. You don't judge yourself for what the product of that emotional processing is. It's the outcome that matters. Because when you process that emotion, you're going to see an opportunity on the back end of that is something that you wanted. And once you start connecting that, you can literally create everything you want in your life because you no longer fear the emotional attachment that you have from a situation of the past.
Beautiful. So you've actually taught us to shift the energy by using our body and understanding where it's sitting and working with that to bring it into the present moment so that we are not fearful of what's coming up.
Exactly.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you, Matthew. I feel like we've had a deep experience through this conversation as well, and really a lot to process and think about. And I hope for the listeners too. So I think we've come to the end of our time, and I really want to ask you, what is it that you would like to leave our listeners with as a parting thought, tip, whatever it is that you would like to say?
life is a voyage of uncharted waters, and the more we allow life to take hold, it will take us into places that we've never imagined, and we become more successful than we could ever have thought possible. So stay in the moment and don't forget to breathe. That's how you grow beyond change, and that's what I teach as the inner voyager, or what I should say, what I empower others to do.
Yep, because we are inner voyagers, right?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Daphne. I greatly appreciate it.
This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.